Now, from Wish TV, your local news source, this is All Indiana Politics.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome to another edition of All Indiana Politics. I'm Phil Sanchez. Today we launch our series of interviews with some of the key candidates on your ballot. We begin today with Indiana's 8th Congressional District in Southwest Indiana. Congressman Larry Bucshon is not seeking another term. 3 names on the ballot. They are Republican Mark Messmer, Democrat Erik Hurt, and Libertarian Richard Fitzlaff. Messmer turned down our request for an interview. We first hear from Erik Hurt. He sat down with our Garrett Bergquist.
I grew up with working class parents. I saw the amount of work that they put in to try and make a good life for me, for my family, and I've seen that kind of work be devalued year after year after year. People who think that people working in service positions, in factory jobs, the jobs that we saw through COVID in 2020 were the essential jobs, those essential workers. And you have people who say they don't deserve a living wage, that they don't deserve good benefits, that they don't deserve health care because of these jobs. And I believe that these people are the backbone of our country, of our economy. Nothing moves without the working people.
So the economy is playing a big role in this election, as you just alluded to, especially when it comes to inflation and the cost of housing. What are your plans to address those issues?
Absolutely. So I believe, and we've seen this in reports, that a large driver of that inflation is corporate greed. That's what we've seen. And there are proposals already put in place by people like Senator Elizabeth Warren for things like windfall profit taxes, which would look at when companies are raising prices, bringing in record profits, that we are taxing that money and putting it back into the pockets of working class people. In terms of the housing crisis, there are a lot of issues going into that. One of the main ones being overseas corporations buying single-family homes, renters buying multiple single-family properties that are, spending a majority of the year just vacant or empty. These people are driving up the cost of housing. We need to make sure we're implementing taxes on multiple rental properties, preventing these mega corporations from buying out these single homes, as well as just making sure we're investing in building homes and communities for people.
What's your plan for the southern border?
This is a boon to many of our communities. Certainly in rural Indiana, we have a lot of people coming from across the border who are contributing so much to these communities, where a lot of people have left. So the plan at the border is to, again, lead with empathy and understanding and look at the issues that are happening, because there are drugs that come over, there are those issues, but we can look at root causes. So say you look at drugs, is it a border issue or is it an opioid issue? Is it a drug issue? How can you attack that, and how can you get to the root cause of that problem in this country, which often deals with poverty, with mental health? People don't do drugs just because they want to do drugs. There is an intrinsic link between poverty, negative mental health, and substance abuse. And we can look at tackling that to tackle the actual issues happening at the border, not just people coming through. And so I think that is an important part of tackling that issue and finding ways to make the citizenship process for people coming across easier, more straightforward, so that we can get these people in and help build our country up better, because we are a country of immigrants. Immigrants have made this country what it is, and that needs to continue.
Our national debt is now at $35 trillion and climbing. What's your plan to get it under control?
I think we have to look at how we do reasonable spending. It's not about cutting programs, it's not about cutting taxes. Cutting taxes is only going to increase that problem, particularly with the Trump tax cuts on the ultra wealthy, on corporations, because we're taking money out of our pool. We have to look at reasonable and responsible spending. And a lot of that comes with long-term vision when it comes to things, and not just short-term gains. And so when we're looking at infrastructure, when we're looking at how we're building our communities, designing our communities, we have to not just be putting Band-Aids on things, whether it's roads, whether it's sidewalks, highways. We need to make sure we're investing and to modernizing these things so that they're longer lasting, and that we're not faced with these kind of extreme costs when things go wrong. And so looking at how we can best invest our money for long-term success is important. Raising taxes on the ultra-wealthy, I think, is important in order to get more money back. And these are things like wealth taxes, like they did in Massachusetts.
Would you support a federal abortion law?
A federal abortion law to protect abortion?
To protect or regulate abortion, anyway.
Yes. So I believe when it comes to issues like that, I think a federal approach should be required, because when you leave it to the states and you leave people vulnerable in that way, it proportionally negatively impacts low-income communities. Because if you are wealthy, if you are in that position, you're always going to be able to go to another state where it's legal. You're always going to be able to travel to get that health care that you need, where if you're in a poor or marginalized community, you may not have access to that kind of transportation. You may not be able to take the time off of work, or all of these other things that negatively impact low-income people. And so you're going to see a greater disparity. And so I am obviously in favor of abortion, of a woman's rights to choose. And so I think making sure that that is legal nationwide, so that there isn't that greater disparity between the rich and poor when it comes to that issue, is crucial. And there are things that can be left to the states and how they manage certain things, but that's not one of them.
All right, coming up, we sit down with Libertarian 8th District candidate Richard Fitzlaff. Welcome back. We continue our coverage of the 8th District race. We just heard from the Democratic candidate in the race, or Garrett Bergquist, also talked to the Libertarian candidate Richard Fitzlaff. As a reminder, the Republican candidate turned down our request for an interview.
I believe that Indiana deserves people who are going to have sound fiscal and social policies. My policies, whether they are income tax reform, Social Security reform, or veterans care, are policies that speak to each and every Hoosier individually.
So let's start with the income tax issue. Am I correct that you want to replace the income tax system with a national sales tax system?
The fair tax would function similarly to a national sales tax. The fair tax is the only piece of nonpartisan legislation that would eliminate the payroll tax and allow people to keep more of their money in their own pocket and only spend money or only spend on taxes when they go to spend their money.
But sales taxes tend to hit people with lower incomes the hardest. How will you offset that?
It's often said that way, but when individuals are empowered with their own money and how they can invest it, how they have an investment vehicle of their choice, save it, use it for other purposes, they're more free to be able to build success. Generational wealth happens not because we put a sales tax on someone. Generational wealth occurs when we empower people to make their own decisions with their own money.
So the national debt is now at $35 trillion.
And climbing rapidly.
And how do you plan to bring that down while minimizing the impact to people who might end up losing government services as a result of spending cuts? For example, here in Indiana, we have the families of medically complex children who lost coverage under attendant care.
Absolutely. And that's a very complex situation that not only needs to look at the entitlement reform aspect, making sure that only those who are truly in need are receiving services. We don't want to leave anyone behind, but we want to make sure that fraud, waste, and abuse are reduced to almost zero, if not zero. Secondly, we look at government programs that are bloated, cost-plus contracts as opposed to fixed-price contracts. There's a number of ways that we can reduce government spending while still ensuring essential goods and services.
The southern border has been one of the nation's biggest issues for the past decade or so. How would you stem the flow of migrants and drugs across that border?
Reagan said it best in the 80s with his City on the Hill speech, although never implemented, that we should welcome people to once again become the greatest country on earth. We should welcome immigrants from all walks of life, just like we did during Ellis Island, where we welcomed people from Asia, Eastern Slavic countries, Italy, the Irish people. They built and helped make this country a country that won World War II, a country that dominated the world stage, that helped lift millions of people across the globe out of poverty and put a man on the moon. Immigrants are a fantastic thing. So it's one thing to say that we should have a staunch border security policy, and that's fine. I can tend to agree with that. We should absolutely vet them. We have some of the greatest military and FBI and Interpol and all kinds of other tools at our fingertips that we can use to vet these individuals. But if they want to come here, if they want to come here through an easy process that includes a very strict background check, to come in and pay taxes and to integrate into the American way of life, we should encourage that and welcome that.
What do you believe Congress can do to fix the housing crisis?
The housing crisis is multifaceted, and while we don't want foreign corporations or special interest groups having control over a minority in the housing market, we also need to look at regulations. Regulations and government bureaucracy right now lead to a huge problem when it comes to the housing market. And so we see that individuals are disenfranchised from being able to purchase homes for themselves and their families. And we need to reinvest in focusing on the individual being able to attain home ownership rather than corporations.
What do you say to people who might fear that voting for you would only ensure that one of the other major political parties wins this election?
Well, let me be clear that Indiana has three major political parties, the Libertarians, which I happen to represent being one of them. And we don't steal or take votes away from another political party. Your votes aren't owned by anyone. Your vote is your vote to give to the person who you believe will best represent you and your family's views for the next 2 years in U.S. Congress.
Ever since the Dobbs ruling 2 years ago, people on both sides of the abortion issue have been calling for a federal law either to ban access to abortion services or to ensure access to abortion services. Where do you fall on that?
I want to make it very clear to the voters of Indiana's 8th Congressional District that abortion, as much as we want to minimize the number of abortions, but that is a choice that needs to be between a woman, her doctor, and her God. It's not a role for the federal government or for the state government, for that matter.
So should there be a federal law to ensure access to abortion services, or where should the government fall on that?
As much as we'd like to minimize abortions, I think the polling would show the same. I believe 64% of Hoosiers want reasonable access to abortion. I don't think that anyone wants it used for an advanced contraceptive, late-term abortions, live birth abortions. No one wants that. But at the same point in time, the more we focus on allowing a woman to make her own choice, whether it's for health care, personal reasons, life of the mother, life of the child, those are decisions between her doctor, and her God. And I don't want government to get involved beyond saying that as long as government's not paying for it, as long as it's a private decision, then that's not a decision for lawmakers to legislate.
All right, coming up, Indiana's best political team on two possible threats to the Trump campaign, including his false claims about immigrants eating pets in an Ohio town. All right, welcome back to All Indiana Politics as we welcome in two members of Indiana's best political team, Republican Ellie Bartlett and Democrat Kip Tu. Let's begin with the situation in Springfield, Ohio. Former President Donald Trump and his running mate J.D. Vance are doubling down on their false claims of Haitian refugees eating pets. The claims have led to bomb threats and school closures in the town. Allie, we'll start with you. With the polls so close, could this tip some centrist voters against Trump?
No, I don't think so. I think first and foremost, you categorize them as false claims, but I don't know that that's really been proven. I think the point of what they are saying is that the media in general has done a very poor job of listening to voters themselves. J.D. Vance made some comments about this topic really over last weekend and throughout this week. And he's just really pointed out that are people on the ground talking to people? Because I've personally done some research. I've been looking on social media a lot, like at people's individual accounts. There are huge problems happening in that town because of the huge influx of immigrants. And whether or not that involves eating pets or eating animals of any sense, I think the bigger picture and the bigger point here is that our open border is a problem. I mean, Springfield, Ohio, I looked this up myself, has 58,000 residents and 20,000 or more immigrants immigrants were dumped into that community. I don't know how any community could sustain something like that. I mean, there has been an increase in crime that's tangible. And again, setting aside eating animals, whether or not that's really happening, there's a huge problem here for the people of Springfield, and it seems like no one's really listening to them, and I think that's the bigger picture.
Allie, let me push back for 1 second, because the town manager says it's not happening.
There's a town manager with political influence as well.
Okay, no, I get what you're saying. What I want to get to is the politics of it all. Is it smart that even you saying, hey, we don't know if this is really happening or not, so is it smart for the potential future president to be talking about something that we can't confirm nor deny?
So listen, I've said this before and I'll say it again. Do I agree with everything that Donald Trump says or how he says it? No, I don't. But to be honest with you, and I said this on the show, I think last week when I was on after the debate, people know what they're getting in Donald Trump as a candidate, right? Like, he's not really concerned about, you know, the way that he's saying things. It's the message that he's trying to deliver. And so he has the advantage as a candidate and as the former president of the fact that he can get away with saying things that maybe other people wouldn't, because the underlying message resonates with people who love him and who vote for him because of his passion. And so again, do I personally think it's like the best thing to say something that you may or may not have all the facts on? Probably not. Right. But do people know what they're getting when they vote for Donald Trump? Yeah, they do.
I get that. Election watchers, Kip, often speak of the October surprise. Is that this here in September?
We're not. We've had so many surprises. Seems like every week there's a new surprise. So I'm not willing to say that. I would like to make a couple comments if I could. The governor of the state of Ohio, Republican governor, has denounced this, said it isn't true, wishes J.D. Vance and Donald Trump would quit saying it because it's causing real harm to the people of Springfield. I think for Allie to just brush it off as no big deal and it's Donald Trump being Donald Trump is, really disappointing, because the former president is endangering a city. There have been bomb threats. They've had to call off school, all based upon a lie, and really a pernicious lie, one that does real harm to real humans, one that is racist at its base, and it divides the country further. It's not the kind of politics we ought to practice. It's not the kind of debate we ought to have in the United States of America, and it's just plain disgusting.
Allie, I'll let you respond to that, then I want to move on quickly.
I do have one quick response to that, because it's funny to hear Democrats say all of this, that, this rhetoric is harmful to these people and we had to shut down schools over bomb threats. Well, Donald Trump was shot over harmful rhetoric just like that, and the hate that was facilitated by the other side around him. So I think we all should practice what we preach and hopefully move forward in a peaceful way collectively. But I really want people to keep that in mind, because he almost died as a result of that same kind of hateful rhetoric that continues to happen.
Let's move on to local politics now. A minute and a half left, so quick answers, please. The town of Sheridan in Hamilton County wants to consolidate with Adams Township. They want to prevent any possible annexations by surrounding towns. Allie, Hamilton County officials, though, say the merger could put Sheridan millions of dollars in the red. We'll start with you on this one, too.
I can't give really an opinion on this, because I think it's up to the locals, just to be honest with you. That's kind of how I view this sort of thing. I would always yield to local control. I don't live in Hamilton County, but it sounds like there are some opportunities there. This is kind of the thing that we see. It's a good problem to have, because it means that these communities are growing and thriving and that they need to see potentially some kind of change. So yeah, I don't know if I can give a direct answer as to whether it's good or bad, but I think the locals should be the ones to decide.
Kip, go ahead, respond on that one.
Well, I'm going to kind of agree with her on that. I would encourage the people that are involved, the people in Sheridan, the people that are potentially going to be annexed, to try to get to the facts, try to find the information to make the best informed decision. These are always difficult things, and it's folks have to look at where they're going to get their services and how that's going to be most cost effective. And it happens across the state on occasion in very different places where annexations are occurring. Annexations most times are very beneficial to the folks that are being annexed, but some people don't want to have city services and don't want to pay city taxes. So they have to just balance all that.
Listen, we'll leave it right there. I'm glad we were able to end the conversation on agreement. Love when that happens. Good to see you both. Let's go Fever. Let's go Colts. Good to see you. We'll talk soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics this week. We'll be back here next Sunday morning, as we always are, at 9:30. And remember, tune in at 6 p.m. on October 3rd for our live televised debate.